And welcome back, everyone, to yet another edition of the Sports Frenzy podcast. Phil Penarski here, happy to be joined by our News 8 sports correspondents, Dean Holzwarth and Andy McDonald. Once again, gentlemen, we've got a lot to talk about, a lot of disappointing news. You know, I kind of wanted to start this show maybe like a funeral kind of vibe because, I mean, it's just been a
bringing the music,
very difficult week and weekend for Michigan sports fans. You know, of course, we're going to be talking about the Lions and their loss to the Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday night. Also, our college football teams, the Michigan State Spartans and the Michigan Wolverines, also taking some L's in their matchups this weekend. But we do want to begin, of course, with the big news, that being that the Tiger season is now officially over. A very heartbreaking end to a season, but again, an end to a season that we've been kind of anticipating for quite a bit now. You know, it was before, you know, are they even going to make the playoffs? Then they got into the wild card round against Cleveland, and then we didn't know what was going to happen there. They ended up winning, and then they ended up going 5 games against Seattle. It just felt like even when they were this close, the end of that season was just always on the horizon. Guys, now that the season is over, just initial thoughts, really. Again, it's something we've been following for a really long time, the rise and then the ultimate fall of this season.
Yeah, I mean, I think I know how Andy feels about this whole thing because we've kind of talked about this, but like I got a little mixed emotions here because I think on one hand, obviously it's super disappointing because they had opportunities to be playing right now against the Toronto Blue Jays, right? On the other hand, you know, they didn't do enough. Obviously, offensively, the bats weren't there. The middle of the lineup wasn't there, especially in Game 5. So it's tough to kind of look back and you know say, hey, this was a successful season, you know, overall, because just the disappointment of not being able to get there. But I think overall, like I do think the Tigers kind of overachieved. And that's the kind of the word I was thinking about this week was like, I think they did overachieve. Like, I didn't think they had enough to get to where they needed to go. You know, we talked about midway through the year about possibly winning the World Series, and does this team have enough? And they just didn't have enough. You know, pitching I thought was really, really good throughout the Seattle series, except for that one game. But, you know, the bats just didn't come through for them.
Yeah, no, it was... Overall, it's one of those years where it just ended in the same spot that it did the year before, so it makes it very difficult to judge. I mean, they won a couple more games, but I think after what happened in September, you would kind of throw the regular season out the window. And again, what you said, Dean, is literally the perfect word. I mean, they definitely overachieved. This team clearly proved in this final playoff game, 15 innings of just agonizing, dragging you through the mud for all these innings of just we can't score. We somehow have pitching. It doesn't make any sense. It was just the perfect add-on to really end it for what the season kind of felt like. And the fact that their 3 through 5 hitters went 0 for 23 in that game is just the perfect description of if you can't get any more clear of a sign if you're Scott Harris that you need to add a bat to this lineup, then I don't know what it is, because you can try to say that they need to cut down on strikeouts, they can try to do more. I mean, obviously the presser will get a little bit more into that. They kind of mentioned bringing some of the guys up. I think the number one message from this year is if they don't add somebody in the middle of those guys, even at least one person to make it a little bit better, that's a for sure contact hitter, hits for average, moves guys around, that kind of thing. That'll help so much with the power that Riley Green and Spencer Torkelson provided, because you don't want them to not hit 36 and 31 home runs. That's a lot of power. It's a lot of the reason they drove in runs, but it proved to be a huge problem when people started to figure them out and they weren't hitting as many home runs, and they have to do something about that. But yeah, this year overall was not, I mean, it just felt like it kind of ended in the same spot that it did last year. You got this guy, Terry Skubal, who, again, I'm sure we'll be talking about plenty of times in the offseason. They're probably, in my opinion, not going to be able to pay. It's just the reality of the situation, and you couldn't get it done with him. One time was his fault, Cleveland in the ALDS Game 5 last year with the grand slam, and then this past year he was unbelievable. Obviously, the 7th inning that everybody wants to talk about, that nobody knows if it was Hinch, if it was Skubal that maybe said he wanted to come out. I don't know. There's a lot of different things that went into that, but yeah, you couldn't get it done with him twice to move on to the ALCS. It's kind of a depressing thing. Yep. I love what he said after the game, that he wants the World Series should be the bar minimum. He doesn't think it should be the ALCS should be the goal. It should be the World Series. I just don't know if the organization has the same feelings necessarily. I know Scott Harris mentioned a couple times that they do want to bring a World Series to Detroit. Doesn't necessarily feel like to me it was some of the ways that they're talking about doing the moves. They want to do that anytime soon. That's the problem. So overall this year kind of just felt like it was the same as last year. And again, what you said, Dean, is perfect to me. Overachieving. I think they just overachieved. And if they stick with the same team going into the next year, it's going to be a problem.
Right. And I think a lot of people right now, the blame is being passed around quite a bit, the front office, the pitching, the hitting. Is there any one thing, in your opinion, that really kind of led to this collapse? Or, again, is it just kind of where the Tigers are as a team? And, again, kind of just having that really strong start and then teams kind of adjusting to them throughout the year?
Yeah, it's again, we already mentioned the word overachieving, but that's what it does feel like to me. And that's the thing, is the deadline. They didn't really add any bats in the middle of that order to make them better. There wasn't a lot out there, so I do want to give Scott Harris that. I think a lot of people giving him crap about that, where he didn't add somebody. There wasn't that many, and the people that did get added to other teams, like Eugenio Suarez, who we watched in that series, he hasn't exactly been that great since he got added over there. So, right. I mean, I'll be the first one to say I was wrong saying that I wanted him to get added because he hasn't been that great. Now, I mean, he still did hit a huge home run, made a couple great defensive plays. Is he probably better than Zach McKinstry? Yes. But at the end of the day, it wasn't the kind of move that you want to see them give up a bunch of people for. I think he kind of hinted at the fact that Troy Melton was going to be the guy that they were maybe going to have to give away, who did give some huge innings in those playoff series to them. So overall, I don't think the deadline would have been that much. I think the one thing that kind of led to it, though, is, again, you just have a lot of guys that are 23 and 24 years old that are trying to lead this team. Gleyber Torres was the one really proven major leaguer who obviously we found out had to have the hernia surgery the day after the regular season ended. Mm-hmm. So he was laboring through something the entire second half, and odds are we're probably not going to see him be a Tiger next year. So, who's going to be the guy in this lineup that's really going to make a big change? Spencer Torkelson struck out 161 times. Riley Green struck out 201. You just can't have that in the middle of your order, no matter how much power you have. You have to have somebody that can move people around. I think that's kind of the one thing you found out this year in the middle of it, is those guys are not mature enough with their swing yet to be able to, if they're going to hit for power. Torque made a lot of adjustments. I think he made a lot of adjustments with making contact and having swings like that. And Riley Green, obviously, the power department was huge. The clutch hitting numbers aren't great either, but overall, it's just cutting down the strikeouts is the one thing, and I think that's kind of what caught up to them in the second half, is they have a lot of guys that don't hit the contact. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I think they, it's kind of weird to say, I think they peaked too early, right? We played so well the first couple of months, and then they kind of hit that lull, and then they started struggling, with their bats, and then obviously pitching at times, and then it just kind of was a free fall from there. So, I don't know, obviously it's a long season, and I think expectations got to them a little bit. I think there was such high expectations, hey, they're the best record in baseball, they're going to win the Central. And so they didn't face that last year as a young team. They were the surprise team that came out at the end and played the best baseball of anyone and made the playoffs. So I think it was just a different kind of scenario, where the expectations were a little bit greater this year and they didn't fulfill them the way that they should. But Andy, I agree. They need some veteran leadership. If you look at all of the good Detroit teams, they need that veteran in that clubhouse to kind of calm the young guys down, and they just don't have that right now. They just have a bunch of young guys, and they're probably going to be even younger next year.
Did you guys both watch all 15 innings of that game?
Yeah.
So there's probably a point that you missed, Phil, where late in that game, when Cater Montero was going up against Josh Naylor, who had just torn him apart the last two games of that series, I think everybody in their head is screaming, just pitch around this guy, because there was two outs, no reason to pitch to him, right? And Cater just kept hanging these changeups back to back to back, and he kept fouling them off and slamming them. It's just throw it away. You're screaming that in your head. Gleyber came out there and talked to him on the mound, and I guarantee you what he said to him was, just pitch away from this guy. You don't want to lose this guy. Lose the 7, 8, or 9, the next guy up.
I saw that. Yeah,
that's what veterans do. I haven't seen him do that one time all year, but in a moment when they absolutely needed it and needed to keep that game going, he did it. That's the kind of stuff that players that have been around do for them, and if they don't add anybody like that, they're gonna struggle with that still. These guys have gotten some valuable playoff experience now. They're only going to get better. I do believe that. I think that Riley Green and Torkelson and them, they can make advancements to their game, but it's going to be very hard if they don't have anybody protecting them in the lineup to do that. And Gleyber did that for such a big part of the year, but when he fell off, it showed how tough it was to only have one bat like that hits the contact and works counts like that and works pitchers like that. They need to add some of those guys. I think it's a pretty simple answer.
Yeah. And lastly, real quick, sorry, Phil.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
So and look what the Tigers pitching did against Seattle. Now look what Seattle did to Toronto the first two games.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So they pitched very, very well, except for that one game in Detroit.
I would say I think this is where baseball is a weird sport, because that Tigers team, you're watching that Seattle team right now. That's the Seattle team that I thought was coming into the playoffs. How they're playing right now. They are loaded. They have. I picked them in my bracket to go to the World Series. So that's it's not I think this is finally starting to happen for them. They might have been a little cold, and the Tigers had a real chance to take advantage of it. They just didn't get the job done, unfortunately.
Yeah. All right, let's jump in now a little bit into those exit interviews with Scott Harris and AJ Hinch. I will give Scott Harris credit because he did answer a lot of the questions that were asked about him, especially regarding the collapse and those off-season moves. So I'll give credit where credit is due. He did answer those questions, and he said that he also kind of felt that same disappointment, but kind of like what you were saying, Andy, who was he supposed to get out there? He wanted the fans to kind of realize just what the situation was and not just, let's go get the greatest hitter ever right now.
Yeah.
This is who we can actually go get. This is who maybe we're not willing to give up. This is maybe somebody that we could give up, but, it just really wasn't working out there. But, does that kind of make you feel a little bit better? Just all of his comments, really, just in general about the season. Hearing what he had to say, did that make you feel a little bit better to kind of take the burnout, or was it maybe a little bit more of coping, I guess, just dealing and just trying to, explain what happened?
A little bit. It made sense, right? And he said that some of the guys they were looking at, if you look at what they did after the trade deadline, they underperformed. Mm-hmm. All right, so he was like, and that was kind of his point, right? If we went out and got these guys, gave up a top prospect, and then who knows what they would have done. And then he talked about in one instance they wanted someone from the roster, postseason roster, to trade away. So it does, I kind of understand that from that aspect of not wanting to give up a prospect, because it is a roll of the dice, right? It's a gamble. Hopefully this guy pays off, and these guys that they're looking at obviously didn't pan out for some other teams, and so who knows if they would have for Detroit. So for me, a little bit makes me feel a little bit better that maybe a big bat wasn't going to help us if we did get it.
No, for sure. I think that what he said in his press conference, there's so much to dissect that it's like an hour-long conversation. And I think that they still feel like they're in a good spot, and that's good for them. I think that when he talks about the deadline, we're never going to know who he actually had to give up. He did admit that some of the people that were directly linked to the media that people were mentioning, like an Eugenio Suarez, or I would guess Nolan Arenado was probably one of the other names. Mm-hmm. He only played 11 games in the second half of the season, Arenado that is. So these are guys that wouldn't have maybe worked out for them, but at the time you're thinking to yourself, you got to add. The one thing he did kind of backtrack that I didn't really agree with is that he said that we had 6 All-Stars in the first half. Okay, let's be realistic here. That Zach McKinstry is probably not an All-Star every single season.
No.
Javi Baez will probably not be an All-Star again. I think the whole city of Chicago voted for him. That helped him get in. It's you can still see the writing on the wall. They probably needed to add some people, especially because they went into the break on that 3-game losing skid where they got swept, and then they ended up going on the losing skid right after the break. There was a clear sign that they did need to add somebody. So I don't really agree with them acting like they had all-stars. They were fine. But the thing for me that I take away from the whole conference, I'm fine with the deadline stuff, more or less. It is what it is. The team was what it was, what it ended up being. And he probably was correct. No matter who they added, they weren't going to win the World Series with this team, I don't think. I think that what concerns me a little more is going forward in the future. I think that what he mentioned about how they're just going to bring people up from the minor leagues, and they expect some of these guys that they don't want to block some of the pathways for some of these guys that excelled at the minor league level. That's fine if you think that you're going to be able to protect them when they get up here and make it to that way. You kind of mentioned through some shade in the Al Avila era, saying that when Torkelson came up and Riley Green came up, they weren't basically ready and they didn't have the people around them. I think the biggest thing that I took away from that is they're going to try to do that same thing. How does that work where it's a problem with Riley Green and Torkelson striking out as many times as they have, but you're going to bring these guys up and say that they're going to protect them and going to be great? I don't really think that's going to work to make you stay on the same competitive, advantage you are right now. So I do have a little bit of concern with how they're handling the minor leagues and the opportunity they have to maybe trade some of these guys, like a Max Anderson or people that aren't at the top of the farm, the 2 catchers they have. I don't know if they're ever going to do that. And I think that's the bigger problem for me right now is that I don't see it happening. I don't see it happening in the future. I think they're going to stick with the minor leagues no matter what and try to do it that way. Eventually, you're going to have to add somebody to help this team, right. I feel like.
Mm-hmm. Well, and again, if they were going to go that route, kind of runs into the same issue again of having that veteran leadership. You're just getting younger doing that.
Yeah. Right. It's a real problem.
You have to add that something.
If you don't have anybody in there that's been around and done it on some of these teams that have made the World Series or whatever, Glaber was a great ad, but again, they like Kevin McGonigal. They're probably going to bring him up. They're not going to pay Glaber. I could already see them signing Kevin to the same kind of deal that they signed Cole Keith to, which is great. Like, I mean, he's a good player, but again, it's so unproven. It's not known. You guys have Tarek Skubal for another year too. Like, no matter what, they could, if they really wanted to, they could burn him out to the end of next season and they would still have him for another year. This seems like the time to add, like, to bring players to this team and try to win, because you have that window. If they went for it, made the ALCS, would anybody really be mad that they like had the talent on this team, like a couple hitters? They had a couple veteran hitters that are really good, you know, like an Alex Bregman, something like that. Not saying it would be him necessarily. If they did that, would anybody really be mad that they made the LCS and lost in Game 7 and pushed to make the World Series? I feel like you'd appreciate that Harris like tried to do that instead of just giving us Max Clark and Kevin McGonigal and hoping for the best. I don't know. There's a big difference there to me, but
Right, and that kind of leads into this final point about Tarek Skubal. I mean, Scott Harris was asked if he thought that maybe they were going to be able to generate the money and maybe re-sign him to a longer deal. I mean, he's probably he is the best pitcher in the league. He's got to require that highest paid pitcher money, and he said that he was confident that the front office was going to provide that money and that they were he liked where they were and potentially getting a deal done. But again, you know, he's going to require so much money, and I just don't know if the Tigers are that team to do it. Guys, I mean, just focusing on those comments about the Tarek Skubal situation. I mean, how do we feel about how that's actually going to turn out?
Yes, I don't think they're going to pay him. You know, like I don't.
You think this is going to be the last year for them?
I think this will be the last year for him. You know, unfortunately, you have a 30-year-old pitcher, and like it depends on kind of too like the length of his contract, like how many years, right?
Yeah.
But now you're paying that contract for however long the deal is, and so like I just don't think that the Tigers, not that they probably couldn't be in a position to do it, I don't think they will.
Yeah, I mean, Scott like mentioned in the press conference that he didn't want to comment on it, didn't want to make anything because he can't do anything about it yet, basically, when it comes to free agents and Skubal and stuff like that. I think that is the correct response. You don't want to like put any shade out there towards the player. I think that's the best way to kind of do it, is just to not say anything. And I don't like people that think the Tigers don't spend any money. They are the 18th highest payroll in baseball. Like they're middle of the pack, and they have spent money in the past. So it's not like Detroit can't spend money. I don't really understand the perception of that. They've done it when they competed in 2012 and all those years around that time. So
they
yeah,
did a big contract too.
And it's not like they couldn't do that if they didn't want to. Will ownership. I mean, Scott Harris says that Chris Ilitch is giving him all the funds he needs. The problem is, I don't think it's really hard to tell if it's Chris Ilitch actually not giving him the money, or if it's just Scott Harris is, you know, the smartest guy in the room kind of vibe and thinks that his farm system is the best and that's all he needs. So I don't know. It's a hard thing to do. At the end of the day, though, Tarek Skubal wasn't his, and all the vibes that I get from him, I don't think they'll pay him because of that reason. And like, if they get into a bidding war with LA or New York's always going to offer one more. It's going to be one more.
Right.
Will anybody actually offer him that much money? I don't know. It's going to be interesting. So the Tigers do keep him and don't get rid of him this offseason through the deadline. What if he doesn't start out next year as great? That's gonna mess up a lot of things. Like, people will second guess it a lot, no matter what, if Scott Boras is his agent or not. So there's so many things that go into it. I think if you're a Tigers fan, you want him traded, though, you probably have to do it this offseason. That's when you're gonna get the most value for it. But I don't think they will. I don't think they'll do it because they won't sign anybody else. That's just my opinion on it.
It's going to be a long off season for Tigers fans. And again, just another wait and see season. Again, we'll be paying close attention to whatever happens this off season, bringing you the latest here on the Sports Frenzy podcast. Let's move on now. And we've got more grieving to do because the Detroit Lions lost as well this past weekend. They dropped now to 4-2 on the season after losing to the Kansas City Chiefs 30-17 on Sunday Night Football. That game, again, just felt really flat offensively, defensively. It just felt off. There was just something about that game. I'm not going to fully say that Detroit is, you know, they're going to brush it off because I really don't know, or, you know, saying that it was kind of a fluke that it happened, or, you know, it's just a one game or something like that. There just felt like something was off, and you just hope that it doesn't really kind of continue throughout the rest of the season, especially with the big game against Tampa Bay this weekend.
Yeah, it felt like to me that Detroit, or that Kansas City needed that game more than Detroit needed it. That's just kind of what it felt like to me. The way they came out in the second half and played. Patrick Mahomes is having a heck of a season right now. I got to give all the credit to him. I understand like the officiating and stuff like that, but you're not going to catch me saying that was the reason they lost that game. There was plays that suck, and obviously I'm sure that they. If I had to guess, I don't know if Campbell commented on it yet, or I didn't catch it or not. If they talked to the officials about the first touchdown not counting with the whole callback there and stuff, you're not going to convince me that New York didn't call down and buzz in one of their ears and tell them that they should look to that because it took so long for them to make that decision. Yeah. So like there are definitely things that the officiating, it was crap. There was a bunch of stuff that went that way, but the Chiefs also played really good. Aiden Hutchinson didn't have to push Patrick Mahomes down after taking 2 steps there. I think that was a pretty clear roughing the passer. And I think that in the Amon-Ra drop in the first half, like that's a huge play in that game. They're up 10-6. If he makes that catch, I'm not going to blame Amon-Ra. I mean, probably his first drop in the last 3 years. But it's just that there was a couple mistakes there for the Lions too, and I just think the Chiefs were the better team in that game overall. But is it a reason to panic? No. And I think that Detroit's fine. This isn't exactly the easiest test. I don't care how many receivers that the Bucs are missing. Baker Mayfield's on another planet right now. He's lost in that house a couple of times. So he's going to come in there and give it everything he has. But is it time to panic? Even if they lose this game, is it time to panic for me? Unless they lose 40-0 or something like that. No, I think that this team will be fine. This is a tough part of their schedule. They're missing a couple of their guys now. Brian Branch, thanks for that very much. But like, there's a couple of things that right now need to get cleaned up. But I don't think the Lions. It felt like they played good in that game. They should have had more than 17 points, if you ask me. So. Yeah, I think they're going to be okay, but it was just the Chiefs needed that. They needed it, and you could see it in the second half, and they played well to get it done, in my opinion.
Yeah, my quick takeaway is kind of the same thing. Like, there's no panic, I think, involved here. This was a game that you kind of maybe circled as a loss when we looked at the season or the schedule before the season. Just some drives they couldn't sustain. Obviously, some bad breaks. I think Kansas City was more wanting not to fall to 2-4. And they did play better. I didn't like some of the stuff that went on. A lot of the holding calls, this and that, like 0 penalties by an NFL team in this day and age. Give me a break.
It was ridiculous.
Like that is literally ridiculous. And Branch should never have hit Juju, but if you watch what he did to him, and knowing Branch was already banged up, like I understand the frustration boiled over for Branch, but like you still shouldn't do that because now you cost your team against, Baker Mayfield next week.
Yeah. And I mean, all these Lions fans always want a guy with edge. I mean, Brian Branch is the guy that gives you edge. Yeah. I think you just need him to keep it when he's on the field. I don't care.
He does.
If you're gonna get up in somebody's face and talk smack, I mean, that's what they're about, right? They have that kind of attitude. But yeah, you don't need to punch somebody in the face.
Yeah, Dan Campbell's not gonna that's not what this organization is about, right? And I'm not saying they would ever get rid of Brian Branch, but like they just don't want guys like that. They want the competitive guys, right, with a lot of fire and who are gonna freaking play their butts off, but they just don't want guys who cross that line and do things like that.
As he does most of the time. Dan handled it perfectly with the comment. Just saying, I love Brian Branch, but like that's not going to be accepted here. I would expect nothing less from Dan because he's done such a good job with that.
Yeah.
Well, now Brian Branch is out for that game against Tampa Bay, and the defensive side, I mean, the back end has been thin really this whole season. This is another guy that they're losing now for this game. Andy, you touched on that. You don't really feel like that this is how the Lions are going to be the rest of the season unless they were to lose, say, 40-0 against the Buccaneers.
At home.
But again, this does kind of feel like a big game. Maybe not at the point of a must-win game, but kind of don't want to drop 2 games in a row, especially 2 games against 2 teams that are going to be in the playoffs and kind of in that same level, same elite status of top teams right now to start this season. And right now, I mean, the Detroit was the only team to lose in the NFC North last week. I know Minnesota was on a bye, but they technically didn't lose last week.
Yeah.
Again, I mean, just how big of a game is this one coming up on Sunday?
I mean, you want to win going into the bye week, right? And so I think as far as that goes, that you want to get the win. And obviously, Tampa Bay's playing great. They had their first kneel down ever in the fourth quarter to get a win this past week because they've just been pulling off these late game finishes.
Right.
And Baker has been playing great. He is, he's up there for MVP and rightfully so.
He should win it if this is the end of the day.
Because he's playing very, very well right now. And so, he's got that bugaboo with the Lions, and I think the Lions are going to come ready to play. I think they're going to have a bad taste in their mouth from Kansas City. I think they're going to, move the ball and play well, and I think it's going to be a shootout on Monday night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, the Lions always respond in these kind of situations. It's been right now they haven't ever lost after losing. They haven't lost again under Dan Campbell since they started to win games. So like it's definitely a stat to pay attention to, and it's something that they've done. You got it. Until then, it's kind of hard to go against them. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's a must-win game because I'm actually going to pick the Bucs in this one. I do think they're going to win. I think people are going to freak out about it, but I don't think that it's the time to freak out because I think the real thing with the Lions is health. If they can stay healthy, I think this is the best team in the NFL. I really believe that. I think that their secondary was so good at DJ Reed and Brian Branch and Kirby. Again, Kirby's even kind of banged up. If he, not a clear answer if he's going to play in this game for sure. He kept coming in and out of that game.
Yep.
So it's just there's so much on both sides. I guess when it comes to injuries right now in this game specifically. Right. Now, whatever happens, I'm not going to take too much away from it anyway to say, like, this was some game they had to win. Now, I mean, do I think the Lions have a great chance to win? Yes, it's at home, and again, they haven't had this happen yet. But there's just so much motivation for Baker, and he hasn't given me a reason to believe this year, at least, that he can't do the job, I guess, just because he's been able to do it so many times. But, yeah, either way, it's not time to panic because you just have so many guys out, and I think as this team gets healthier, they're going to get better regardless, no matter what the result is on Monday night.
Yeah,
yep.
Right. Again, going to be a big game on Monday. So, and of course, we record these episodes on Tuesday, so we'll get instant reaction from that game next week. So, again, looking forward to that one. Again, we still have some time left, guys. We do have to continue this sad parade that we've got because we had Michigan Wolverines and the Michigan State Spartans both losing this past weekend. Again, not a whole lot of expectations for Michigan State going into this year, but they did lose to UCLA, which recently has been pretty good, but throughout the first part of that season was dreadful. And then you've got Michigan losing to USC. Again, that's their second loss right now. Maybe putting some question into potential playoff contention. Again, there were some people kind of split on that in the offseason. But again, you had Michigan. They were a big name. You could have seen them in the playoff, but this is kind of putting a shadow over that. Now, who had the, I guess, worst weekend then between the two teams?
It's Michigan State. Yeah. I mean, I think overall, this game was one that on the schedule you circled they couldn't lose. Be the first to admit that I was wrong. You guys want to know why I'm never positive on this show? That's probably why, because the one time that I was, look what happens. So, yeah, it's just it's sometimes a reality check, and Michigan State just still isn't there yet. I think that this kind of was I was golfing on Saturday with a Michigan State fan, and he was every time he checked the score, just an absolute disbelief. Like I think that's how the whole fan base feels right now is just, oh my gosh, our defense is so bad again. It's like you think about, you've probably had a period in your life. I mean, if you're a Detroit or Michigan State fan where the team hasn't been good, and every week you just know what's going to happen. I think Michigan State's kind of back in that void right now. They're not there. I feel like their season kind of got put in the grave a little bit this weekend. Not that, I mean, UCLA did the same thing with Penn State, but they just lost Northwestern and lost their head coach. So you can't really even say that was like the best win in the world right now with how much Penn State struggled too. So yeah, it's definitely, it's crazy to see what has happened to Michigan State with all the years they were good under D'Antonio. It's just they've had such a hard time getting back since then, and the Mel Tucker stuff obviously didn't help it at all. And yeah, right now I think with Jonathan Smith, you're kind of in a tough spot now, figuring out where to go in the future. Obviously, they have more games in their schedule, and they could change this all, and we could be talking about something else in 4 weeks. But I definitely think if you had to say who had the worst weekend, it'd be Michigan State right now.
Yeah, I'm gonna say it was Michigan. Like I just. You have a game where you can kind of prove yourself that you should be in the top 25, and you just go out there and lay an egg. Your offense goes back to your stale stuff of just the play calling and not opening up things up for Bryce. And it's just frustrating to kind of watch. And then your defense lets a third-string running back torch you for 170 yards and all that. Like, it's just... There was no consistency. There was still, I don't think they came ready to play. They had some good drives and did some good things, but like... I don't know. Just overall, that was a disappointment to me. And now the backs are against the wall a little bit for Michigan. You have to come back and beat Washington at home, and then you got to kind of run the table. Yeah. If you want to make the college playoff.
I think, but coming into the season, we both thought Michigan would be like an 8-4, 9-3 team, right? So
so they have one more loss.
I think for me, this is kind of on schedule. I think if they win this Washington game, they're kind of at where they were at. Like Bryce Underwood looks like a freshman. And I mean, yes, he was cocky and said everything that he said about how there's no one else like me and all this. I understand that. But in reality, that's having confidence in yourself at that age. Like, I don't really have a problem with it. I think it's just this is probably where Michigan should be. I mean, they were not good last year. Yeah. They still don't really have the talent around Bryce to do it. It's a huge game this weekend, I guess, with Washington. Yeah. If you were to ask me the same question after this week, I would definitely tell you that Michigan would have the worst weekend if they lose to Washington, because then you're in a little bit of trouble.
100%.
Like, you gotta, I think, and Washington's not a bad team. I think that they're very underrated.
They've had some big wins.
They're going to come in and play Michigan tough, and I think that this game is huge. Because if Michigan does win this game, most likely they can run the table or get close to it until they get to Ohio State. Then you have a chance to really get ahead of schedule and make the playoff if you find a way to somehow win that game. So this is Michigan's weekend, if you ask me right now.
Someone said Michigan was going to go 10-2. It was Phil.
I don't know who said that. Whoever said it does not know anything about college football.
The one thing I want to say about the Michigan USC game too that kind of throws me off is that I don't know if you guys were able to watch it, but Justice Haynes did get hurt in the first quarter, and he was running like a madman. So that I don't want to put it all on one player. You should be better than that, but like. I think Michigan would have been in this game a little bit more if he never went out of the game. Right. I do think that was a huge factor in it too.
Yeah, but their defense did struggle.
Oh yeah, no, 225 yards on the ground. That's a huge problem. That's not
trademark of Michigan thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, that's not Michigan football.
And they haven't been that way all year. They've been pretty good against.
So surprising.
Wisconsin had a little bit of early success
that were there was just
crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Yeah.